let me open the session now. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. My name is Zhang Yuanfu, consultant for TIID ESCAP, and this webinar series is a joint effort of the 5 UN regional commissions. First of all, please let me to set the theme for this webinar, Trade Facilitation for SMEs. So can you see my screen now? Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. SMEs account for the majority of businesses and employment worldwide. In today's interconnected world, many SMEs are lagging behind in digital transformation in that they do not have enough capacities or financial resources to access and effectively use the digital instrument. The UNTF survey includes a pillar for trade facilitation for SMEs, which is an important pillar of the Sustainable TF group. And we're monitoring the progress every 2 years. The survey results indicate that the implementation of measures to increase opportunities for SMEs remain low, only slightly higher than 40%. And this shows a lack of awareness and policies that address the need of SMEs in trade facilitation. The implementation of measures in the trade facilitation for SME group is generally low and varies across regions. Although 80% of the countries have to various extent introduced the trade-related measures for SMEs, less than 20% of the countries have fully included SMEs in their national trade facilitation committees. Many countries are facing challenges when it comes to SMEs' access to single window. Although many AEO mutual recognition agreements have been signed, especially over the past few years to expedite trade facilitation of essential goods, however, SMEs in AEO scheme still face challenges as indicated in the survey that less than 20% of the countries have SMEs in the AEO schemes. In this context, ESCAP, in collaboration with the other UN regional commissions, are organizing a webinar on trade facilitation for SMEs to collect good practices at national, regional, and international level to increase awareness of SMEs in trade facilitation regime and to assist capacity building for countries lagging behind in this area. So please allow me to introduce our panelists today. We have Ms. Sarah Ashur, Trade Policy Analyst from Ministry of Industry and Trade, Egypt. We have Ms. Chami Kim, VP and Executive Director of Digital Trade and Logistics Division, KTNEC, Republic of Korea. We also have Ms. Nerjamo Boko Eva, Head of Secretariat, German Alliance for Trade Facilitation. We have Ms. Salim Bakrot, Economic Affairs Officer, Trade Facilitation Section, UNCTAD. We also have Mr. Pierre Bothano, Senior Trade Facilitation Advisor, ITC. Finally, we have Ms. Celine Kaufman, Head Entrepreneurship, SME and Tourism Division of OECD. So, Ms. Sarah Ashur, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you everyone for attending today. I would now share my presentation. Can you share the presentation, if you can share it from your side?
Yes, I can share it.
So thank you everyone for attending today. My presentation would be focusing on good practices for trade facilitation in Africa for SMEs. If we can go for the next slide. So my presentation would have 5 examples, 3 local and 2 regional. The 3 local are from Egypt, and they mainly focus on availability and familiarity with trade procedure for SMEs. And then the last 2 ones would focus on preferences and clearance of good for SMEs on a regional base. Can we go to the next slide? So Egypt have actually ratified the Trade Facilitation Agreement in 2019, and for now the rate of implementation goes around 23.1%, mainly focusing on Category A. And we've been moving steadily throughout the years. One of the first examples that I would actually start with is one of the pillars and the recent development that we've made. Can we go to the next slide? Yes. We've just in 2020 we've adopted a new law for SMEs. I think that actually synchronizing the legislative framework in order to align with the international commitment is one of the very important steps that we decided to do. The new law actually serves in Egypt. There's SMEs represent 70% of the labor force, and most of agricultural companies are SMEs, and they represent 34% of the GDP. So the new law, actually, the good thing about the new law is sets the base for a lot of incentives, non-tax and tax incentives, such as providing funding and cost of training for MSMEs personals with regards to raising their awareness with the certain aspects of trading and industry. Also on the tax incentives part, it exempts SMEs from several stamp duties and fees. On the customs side, it actually allows MSMEs to have a customs rate of 2%, and also it exempts them from certain taxation on capital gains. Also, it sets the base for governmental outlets for MSMEs, something like one-stop shops throughout the governorates in different places in Egypt. So can we go to the next slide? The other example that I would provide is an example for collaboration between the government and between the international organizations in development cooperation. It's something called the MSME Development Unit that was created within the Federation of Egyptian Industries in Egypt, and which is the employers or association that combines all companies working within the industry sector, and the ILO, the International Labour Organization. It was created in 2018, and the main objective for it is to enable the environment for small and medium enterprises, especially the ones for women and youth, in order to have more access for information and to seek advice on several trade and industrial issues, either free or with a very small fee. It also provides services for them and shared facilities for the submission of papers or documentations with sister units within the FEI, which is something like a one-stop shop also FEI. It also provides training on various topics. It helps them raise the awareness of SMEs on new laws, regulations, and compliance with new international agreements. One very good example and that was implemented lately was the digital literacy for MSMEs with Google and FEI and ILO. It's called programs called Maharat min Google, which is translated to skills from Google. It mainly aims to train 2,000 MSMEs to use digital technology to grow successfully and expand to new markets and connect to new customers. The third example that I would provide is can we go to the next slide? Yeah, it's the MSME platform, which was launched only this year. It's actually launched by the government as a platform that provides all information for the services provided either by the government or the NGOs or the banks in one place. Also, it provides access to all text for laws and agreements that actually MSMEs can make use of, or furthermore, new opportunities to connect to international markets through the Egyptian commercial services. And also it has an interactive part where MSMEs can, if they have any inquiries or any they need any further clarification concerning anything, they can interact with governmental entities and provide their inquiry. The link is under the picture there. If we go to the next slide, these actually were the three examples from Egypt. We would go to the regional example, which is first I chose the simplified trade regime, specifically the one is implemented in the COMESA. As we all know that the informal cross-border trade in Africa accounts for up to 40% of inter-regional trade, with women represented about 70 to 80% in some countries. So we want to go to the next step, please. Next slide, please. Within the COMESA, the prior slide, sorry. Prior slide, please. Yeah. So the SDR regime in COMESA has been implemented for some time now. How does the SDR regime work is that governments identify a list of goods in which they actually exempt from tariffs, and they provide simplified procedures for clearance and for documentation. They provide simple certificate of origin, simple procedures, and it's actually published in the official gazette. Then the COMESA, it's actually 3 or 4 governments that are implementing it so far. And in the pandemic, it's actually have proven, many experts have recommended that many countries put that system into force, especially countries with high cross-border trade, because it with a waiver of certificate of origin or a simplified certificate of origin, it relaxes a lot of documentation needs that are used in customs. Let's go to the next slide. The second example, which I also heard a lot of speakers speak about in the earlier session, is the digitalization of trade documents. We all know that many countries have been going to digitalization, and in Africa, there's a lot of initiatives in order to do that, either in the COMESA or the SADC. If we only imagine coupling that with how much it will help small groups or vulnerable groups of traders, it would be very beneficial. We would go to the last slide now. So in one of the examples in Africa as the SADC e-certificate of origin that was actually adopted in 2019. Now it's mostly in the piloting phase. Some countries who are already ready or have an electronic system in force have actually started piloting. Only Mauritius that's completely working fully with that now, but many other countries like Botswana, Swatini, Malawi, Namibia, Tanzania, Zambia are fully establishing their national ECO models and are currently piloting the stage. And actually, it has been helping a lot of SMEs that are contribute to a huge part of our economies. So that's in brief the 5 examples that I have my presentation focused on today. Thank you so much for active listening. If there are any questions, I'm welcoming them. Thank you so much for sharing the presentation as well.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Very insightful presentation, which covers a lot of information from legislative reforms to digital platforms and trainings, both at Egyptian level and African level. And next we move to Ms. Chami Kim, as we know that Republic of Korea keep consistently ranking as top performers of the UNTF survey results. So we would like to hear the good practices from Korea. Ms. Chami Kim, please.
It's my pleasure to share the best practice of paperless trade for SMEs in Korea by KTNet in this UN ESCAP. This is Chemi Kim working for KTNet, Digital Trade and Logistics Facilitation with the Ministry of Trade and Industry and KITA. Today, I'd like to show you 4 best practice for SME, including micro enterprise like online global seller. Korea has a hyper-connected community of trade facilitation. Paperless Trade Network is trying to provide seamless flow of private party and public sector. Utrade Hub has 120,000 trader users. Logis Hub has 7,000 logistics companies users. KTNet is handling 3.5 billion B2G and B2B transactions per year. Besides these 2 main portals, Utrade Hub and Logis Hub, this year we just start Trade Flow new portal service for seamless paperless trade between traders and logistics company. By next year, we will provide a new One Meta platform as a next generation digital trade platform including trade flow. This talk, I will introduce 4 sub-portals for SME. First one, Trade Flow. Second one, FTA Korea Plus. Third one, Export Value Chain for cross-border trade. Fourth one, Cargo Flow on blockchain on new digital trade platform. First best practice is trade flow. Data-driven trade facilitation is the main concept. Using intelligent document recognition, B2B unstructured documents can feed B2G document auto-generation. If you upload your own commercial invoice and packing list, TradeFlow can generate export declaration and manifest declaration. Data reuse rate is up to 96%. Second best practice is FTA Korea Plus. FTA preferential tariff is a meaningful benefit for exporter and importer. FTA Korea Plus provide very simple and easy digital workplace to handling global document certificate of origin. If you just upload your product information by Excel or ERP API, FTA Korea Plus guide SME very fast track to issue official certificate of origin. Third best practice is a CBT export value chain. Utrade Hub provides CBT portal for e-commerce exporter, including micro enterprise. If you are K-beauty snail cream seller, you upload sales list, CBT portal generates export declaration automatically. You can easily transfer US dollar sales fund by CBT portal network under very restricted foreign exchange law. Korea has export promotion law, zero tax on buying subsidiary material for export. Seller has to handle many items and sales list every day. CBT portal provides digital workplace for export sellers. Fourth best practice is cargo flow on blockchain. Often, one imported container has many different cargo owners by house BL. During door-to-door cargo transport from imported container, there are many misdelivery among many stakeholders. Cargo flow provides multilateral cargo delivery information from delivery order to transport through band shed. We used permission blockchain to share and validate this long-term transaction. Thank you for giving an opportunity to share 4 best practice with you. Finally, I'd like to close my talk addressing digital federation for future paperless trade. We are providing more than 700 EDI and XML trade documents, but still traders are very struggling with email, fax, repetitive key-in, and many errors. We should start to connect multilateral parties by digital federation in the near future by global interoperable level. We have a YouTube channel and blog for more information and demo. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Kim. Very impressive presentation on the hyper-connected digital communities in Korea with the blockchain technologies, which also include SMEs in this digital community. Next, we move to Ms. Nerjamo Boko Eva. When we were recruiting the panelists, we were very surprised to find that Germany has a designated alliance for trade facilitation apart from its National Trade Facilitation Committee. So, Ms. Nerjamo Boko Eva, now the floor is yours.
Good morning and good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And can you see the presentation?
No.
Okay, I'll try again. Okay, it takes a while to upload. But it doesn't seem to work on my side. Maybe, Nisa, you could share it for me?
Yes, I'll share.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, dear participants, dear organizers, for this opportunity to present our program implemented by GIZ. GIZ stands for Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit. We implement projects in the name of the federal government of Germany, and mainly our funding Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. The next slide, please. The overall objective of our program is to make trade faster, simpler, and safer. So the implementation of support to the implementation of the trade facilitation agreement of the WTO, as well as of selected regional free trade areas, are the strategic framework for our work. We implement projects in more than 20 emerging and developing countries for 2 alliances. So there is the Global Alliance and German Alliance for Trade Facilitation. The difference is in funding parties. So in the Global Alliance, we have more donors who are funding the projects. And there is also some thematic focus areas into alliances. So what we do, our projects aim at reducing time and cost for selected trade procedures and customs procedures. And all projects are set up in the way that we build or we strengthen the public-private partnership. We accompany our partner countries from the idea development through the implementation phase until upscaling if the project was successful. Next slide, please. As you can see, both alliances have this network or this public-private partnership not only at global level, but also at the national level in the countries where we implement projects. And SMEs inclusion is more a cross-cutting issue in all the projects, as is gender. Global Alliance has developed SME and gender inclusion guidelines. In the German Alliance, we have gender guidelines elaborated, and SMEs have to benefit directly or indirectly from the projects we set up. So we all follow this public-private dialogue approach, although we don't support national trade facilitation committees in our projects or not in all projects, but for any trade procedure or customs procedure, we aim to simplify. We have to set up, and we do set up this public-private dialogue. Many countries or many partner authorities require today that before any changes are made into legislation, these consultations have to be held, especially with local associations, with local chamber of commerce and industries, and so on. So this drive to include SMEs is not only coming from our side, but also from local government, which is a very good sign indeed. So you can look at the more detailed information about alliances on the websites. I mentioned them here. And before I present two best practices from two alliances, I just want to mention that we try in our projects to tackle very specific trade processes and procedures, or maybe a special document. We're not trying to do big reforms because they take much longer. So low-hanging fruit, let's say. Next slide, please. This is the first example for pre-arrival processing systems in West Balkan countries. Montenegro, North Macedonia, Serbia, these are countries where we implemented first this approach. It's about so most customs administrations are observing a tremendous increase in e-commerce. Of course, SMEs are maybe not directly impacted by this project, but express couriers with whom we work within these projects, they said that their main clients are micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. And especially in COVID times, this increase in transactions build up this demand also on the customs authorities side. So they need a reliable pre-arrival processing system for express shipments in order to reduce the stocks and warehouse. They are full with shipments, and this was the condition for us to implement the project successfully. The main measurable success was to increase the number of goods that are released within the first hour after arrival from 25 to 53% in average. In some countries it was higher, in the other countries it was lower. But this a small project also led to further changes in the legislation. So some countries also increased the de minimis, they reviewed the groups of products for express shipments. And the successful example is now upscaled. I'm not going into detail of the projects. You can have a look, or you can contact us for more details. We are upscaling this project in further countries worldwide, Cambodia, Rwanda, and other countries. And this we will see how we will be including SMEs into these projects, because when we set up public-private dialogue, we have to get their opinion, how realistic is application of the process, and if the final time and cost reduction was achieved by the target group. Next slide, please. As Craig Fetchhawk mentioned today, he described very well what the Efi certificates and the projects are about. I will not go into detail here, but we, GIZ, implemented for the Global Alliance this Efi certificate project in Morocco. You can see that there were some estimates made for time and cost reduction. Of course, we cannot, we will not achieve that every single farmer can now submit e-certificates by themselves, but even if they use brokers or intermediaries, now they know that there is no physical logistics around the certificate or documents. They can, brokers can submit it sitting from the office. So there is time reduction in documentation compliance, and there is also cost reduction saved per certificate. And then we also calculated the whole waiting time at the borders or at the ports. And if you add this, so savings are incredible. And when we translate it into impact on, of course, impact on these savings on small and medium-sized enterprises much higher than by multinational or bigger corporations. I would not go now into details, but if you have any further questions, me and our new head of the program, Susanne Wolfgarten, she's attending today's webinar, ready to answer. You can contact us anytime. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Boko-Eva. Thank you for your insightful presentation on the multi-stakeholder approach on several of your projects, including pre-arrival processing and eFIDO. Next, we move to Ms. Celine Bacroat from UNCTAD. We know over the years, UNCTAD has been working on promoting the national trade facilitation committees as well as digital portals. So Celine, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jingyan, and thank you for the invite to this very interesting event. So let me share my screen. Yeah, can you see it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So as you know, UNCTAD has been working on trade facilitation for more than 50 years, and our natural counterpart are the governments. So my presentation will be focused on how the governments are responding to the challenges of facilitating trade and facilitating trade specifically for SMEs. So what we can say that today we have a new mindset, and the mindset is actually that now, I mean, to give a background, SMEs represent 90% of the businesses in the world, and more than 50% of employment. And it can be up to 40%, it can represent up to 40% of GDP in emerging economies. So what does it mean? It means that actually nowadays governments have to realize that they have to work for SMEs and not the way around. For many years and up to now, I would say that governments were in a position where it was the traders who had to make the effort. They had to go and get the formalities done. They had to go and visit every border agencies. They had to make the effort to comply with the requirements. And now the governments have realized that they have also to play a big part in facilitating this process. And it makes, you know, the philosophy of trade facilitation very different, because it means that now it's a public-private partnership whereby the traders and the governments play together their role. The second aspect, which was also very much highlighted by the former speaker from Korea, is the fact that now we are in a globalized and digitalized world. And we can see that trade facilitation has been extremely improved and upgraded thanks to technology. And we see a lot of innovations coming up from everywhere, like what, again, the lady from Korea was presenting. So we have, in terms of automation of customs, we have a lot of mobile app, which helped a lot on a daily basis the traders and SMEs. We also have the impact of the COVID-19 crisis and the fact that we were most of us under lockdowns, we were not able to move, but trade had to continue. And it means that the transactions and the formalities were still able to be done, and also the access to information. And this increased and boosted even more the paperless trade. So solutions. I'm focusing on a few best practices. There are many, but I want to highlight some of our technical cooperations based on the trade facilitation agreement. Trade facilitation agreement, as a background again, it entered into force in 2017, and we have today 93% of the member states which have ratified the WTO TFA, which means that when you look at this high number, I mean, it's a very high score, we can see that all the member states have agreed, and they still agree on the fact that trade has to be facilitated. So there is a common acceptance of the fact that trade is too complicated. I mean, trade procedures are too complicated and need to be streamlined, simplified. So I'll start with the Article 1 of the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement. The Article 1 prescribes that member states should publish and make information available to all the traders. It has to be updated, it has to be published everywhere, it has to be accessible to all without discrimination. And this is the key aspect of the trade facilitation agreement. If you don't have information, you cannot make any decision based on strong evidence and solid administrative basis. So you can't have a plan, you can't make a plan, and you can't even prepare your relations with your clients. So you need information which is relevant, updated. And part of our technical cooperation was to set up this trade information portals. And it goes back to the Article 1.2 on information available on internet or through internet. And I can tell that the trade information portal have really increased the dissemination of trade information. As you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, you said that SMEs are usually not aware of trade facilitation measures or what their own governments have ratified. And it's true. So in a way, trade facilitation portals are tools, new tools, to make sure that this reach all the traders, all the SMEs. So we have started, I mean, in UNCTAD, we have developed about 15 trade portals, a little bit more. And you have here the examples of Kenya, and I'm glad to see also that part of the participants are actually from the NTFCs of Kenya. And Trade Portal has really enhanced this visibility that should be given to trade information. And based on the trade facilitation procedures, which are documented on Trade Portal, we have developed a simplification methodology whereby once the procedures are documented, then we can work on them to streamline, to eliminate any kind of duplication, and also adjust the procedures based on the new technology progress. Once you have like procedures online, you can reduce some steps in the procedures. And just to give you an example, in Kenya, we have 45 procedures which have undergone simplification. And it means that in terms of hours, traders have saved 114 hours waiting in the queue or at the counter, or visiting agencies, just by implementing this trade portal. So for traders on a daily basis, it has a very great impact, because it saves time and cost, because you know that every time you have to go and comply and fill the formalities, visit the agencies, you lose time, but you also lose money. And obviously, when we talk about SMEs, we talk about money, business, and time is money, as we all know. So trade information is one of the tools, and it's really a great progress in disseminating trade information. Second article I want to focus on is the article 10.4 on electronic single windows. Electronic single windows is like, I would say, a sister or brother of the trade portal, because it helps automate the trade transactions for customs clearance. And obviously, the objective of the single window is to connect all border agencies under one single point with one entry. And this is obviously online, digitalized, owned by the revenue authorities. Again, I give you the example of Uganda, where UNCTAD has provided technical support. Uganda had the Asikuda system, which is a customs management system, and based on this system, the country developed a single window, and it's one of the most advanced, most sophisticated, and it has increased not only the time of customs clearance, but also the collection of public revenue. Because when you have an automated system based on transparency, then you have less possibility for fraud or for corruption and red tape. So actually, the other winners is not only the traders, but also the government, which see their public revenue increasing through these digital services. The third aspect, the third article that I've selected for this presentation is the article 23.2 on the need for a coordinating body, which we call National Trade Facilitation Committee. So National Trade Facilitation Committee is actually a public-private partnership. It's composed of the businesses, of traders, of business associations, and of border agencies. So they all work together. It's a collaboration and cooperation process whereby all decisions are being discussed and approved and adopted together. So it's based on an inclusiveness, on the principle of inclusiveness, and we can see that once the private sector is engaged in the process, there is much more responsiveness, there is much more compliance, and there is also much more efficiency, because the two players, public and private sectors, can come up with the best decisions, the best framework. And here you have a picture of Kenya again, which had their validation workshop few months ago in Naivasha, in Kenya. And you have actors from the business sector, the public sector. We are actually working with the Global Alliance on Trade Facilitation on supporting the participation of the private sector within the National Trade Facilitation Committee. And in addition to the technical support that we are providing, UNCTAD has been assisting more than 50 NTFCs since the beginning. We have also developed a new tool which is called the Reform Tracker for the National Trade Facilitation Committee, which is actually like a platform, like an IT platform, whereby all the members of the NTFC can work together, can connect together, can update on the implementation of the Trade Facilitation Agreement, and they all, again, from either public or private sector, they have a role to play. They use a digital tool to have more visibility, have more transparency, and have more efficiency. We know that like today, I'm not in Bangkok with you, or I'm here in Geneva, but we still work together. We are connected. Same for the NTFCs, and we understand the role of that to supervise and coordinate the process of implementation of the trade reforms. So the reform tracker that we have now almost in 18 countries, and in Africa, Latin America, and some in Asia, like in Cambodia. Conclusion, we have to remember that trade facilitation is first and foremost for the traders and should help increase SMEs development. We are working for the traders. And when I say we, I'm positioning myself on the UNCTAD side, but on the government side. Government have to serve and work for the interest of the SMEs, because at the end of the day, it will contribute in a positive cycle, the national economic growth. When SMEs grow, employment grows, profit grows, and public revenue grows as well. So it's all about the national development. And I would conclude by saying that the implementation of the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement is one of the solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Celine, for your insightful presentation on the good practices of transparency, electronic single window, and National Trade Facilitation Committee, which has specific implications for SMEs. Next, we will move to Mr. Pierre Bothano, Senior Trade Facilitation Advisor from ITC. And we know that apart from UNCTAD, ITC is also working over the years on trade facilitation agenda. So Pierre, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone. I'm very pleased to speak after Celine from UNCTAD, because as you know, ITC and UNCTAD have a strong relationship, and we are happy to collaborate in many of the areas Celine has mentioned. Let me now share my screen. So, and can you confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. So for the next 10 minutes, I will try to share with you some of the best practices also of ITCs when it comes to supporting SMEs benefiting from cross-border trade through trade facilitation solution. The first element that I want to flag is really building upon what Celine was mentioning on the importance of transparency. ITC has conducted numerous surveys across the world asking thousands and thousands of businesses, what are your key bottlenecks to engage into international trade? And lack of information is definitely coming on top of the business list every time in every country. And I'm pretty sure that if we were running the same type of surveys in Western Europe and the US, we would get the same result. Access to information is the first requirement of businesses. And indeed, the portals that are jointly developed by UNCTAD and ITC in response to the Article 1.2 of the Trade Facilitation Agreement are critical tools to ensure that small businesses can access the information they need to comply with cross-border requirements. And not to repeat what Celine was mentioning, I will try to just show, for those of you that don't know how these portals work, what is the philosophy of it, and I will stress why this specific approach is so important. Can you see a website right here?
Yes.
Yes. So the fundamental philosophy of the portals implemented by UNCTAD and ITC is to make sure, one, that information coming from all border regulatory agencies involved in the clearance of goods are put in the same place. In many countries, information is scattered over a different website, which makes it very hard and time-consuming for the business to access the information. So the first principle is make sure the information is all in the same place. The second philosophy or principle that guides our work is to provide the information from a business perspective. So here, what you can see is that these portals provide to the users and the SMEs in particular the sequential list of action they need to undertake to import, export, or do transit operation in a country. So it tells you exactly what to do, where to go, what documents to submit at each stage of the way. So in this case, to export honey from Tajikistan, for example, we can see that a trader would have to go through probably 50 steps. The portal will also provide some information on all the documents that will be required along the way so that the traders doesn't have to look for the forms or the documentation necessary to comply with the requirements. And finally, this portal gives a very detailed overview of what are the fees and charges to be paid to balance sometimes, let's call it the asymmetry of information between the SMEs and the border official when it comes to the fees and charges that must be paid. So having information online is good. Having information online that is structured in a manner that answers the SME's requirement is the real best practices, and I think this is what UNCTAD and ITC portal are doing. Now, what we realize working in many countries on transparency issues is that having a website is far from being enough. And if you want SMEs to access the information, you need to have dedicated outreach solutions. And I just wanted to share a few of them that we're utilizing when promoting this type of portals in country. First one is very obvious, is have some mass media communication campaign. And having just one article in a newspaper will not do the job. It won't reach the SMEs throughout the entire provinces, the entire country. The second point that we found as being very useful is to leverage existing networks of influencers. So recently, we actually partnered with the CTO of an industrial town in Kyrgyzstan so that they relay to all their, I would say, followers on Telegrams or other platform information about the portal. And using this CTO network, we could reach dozens of thousands of people that would otherwise have never heard about the solution. Third point that is important is we need to promote transparency not only in the country where the information is collected, but also in the neighboring country that could benefit from the information. So again, working in Central Asia on transparency issue, we make sure that we have what we call ambassador programs where Kyrgyz representative will travel in all the other Central Asian countries to promote the portals that they have developed in their own countries. Because we know traders from neighboring country, let's say Uzbekistan, sometimes have challenges to understand and comply with the requirement of Kyrgyzstan. So transparency has to be cross-border. Fourth, more and more we try to embed in some of the portals some artificial intelligence solution. It's called chatbots, so robots that answers SMEs even oral questions of users of the portal that they can record, and then the system will guide the user on how to access the information. Now, the digital world is great, and I heard from many speakers the importance of going through digital solution. I want to stress the importance of not forgetting about all these SMEs and traders that are not online and that are not digital. So I think a speaker before discussed about simplified trade regime for small-scale cross-border traders in Africa. Well, this small-scale cross-border traders connectivity is not that great. And what we have learned over the years is having some light infrastructures at borders is sometimes the best way to facilitate trade. And on this picture, you can see trade information desk that ITC with partners have established at the border between Niger and Nigeria, where small-scale traders can get information and support on how to comply with cross-border procedures. So the officers that are manning this small facility can accompany the traders when they go through the customs clearance process to make sure that they comply effectively with the requirements. So digital is good, but traditional physical support is somehow also necessary for specific clusters of our clients. Now, other things that are important, making procedures simple. I think Céline mentioned a lot the work in simplification of the trade procedures. These are all the documents that are required in a country that actually has a single window, which shows that the digital solution itself is not enough. And sometimes you need to rationalize the documentary requirements before digitalizing, because filling so many forms, even if you can submit it online, remains a very hard burden for the SMEs. So simplifying the formalities, simplifying the documents is the most important step, sometimes before digitalization, for this country that have not streamlined their requirement as of today. Of course, you heard it by all the stakeholders before. I'm not sure I'm going to repeat so much. Digitalization remains a great solution in many cases. And here I wanted to talk about the digitalization of the certificate of origin in Sri Lanka, where we have managed to automate the process from end to end, meaning from the preliminary company registration at the very beginning to the actual process of request, processing, issuance of the certificate of origin, as well as creation of online payment solution. And maybe my key message here to everyone is digitalization is really impactful when the entire process is digitalized. And in many countries I've worked, only part of the process is online. You can submit your doc online, but you need to go physically to get it back from the agency. Or you need to go physically to pay to the agency. Or before that, your preliminary registration has to be done physically. And of course, the real benefits of digital trade or digitalization is when from beginning to end, everything can be done online. Now, two last comments, and I will finish my presentation. More and more at ITC, we try not to work exclusively at the domestic level, but we try to work on bilateral trade flows where SMEs are particularly active. So for example, in this case, we are working on the export of wheat flour from Kazakhstan to Tajikistan through Uzbekistan. And instead of looking at only the domestic reforms, what we try to do is to look at all the obstacles faced by SMEs on both sides of the border, including the transit country, so pretty much a corridor approach. And this is the right level to sort the problems, because just simplifying the process on one side of the border doesn't actually radically change the competitiveness of the SMEs. It's only when you connect facilitation solution on both sides that benefits really arise. For example, in many of the countries in Central Asia, you can issue your certificate of origin electronically at the domestic level. However, you still need to present this certificate of origin physically at the border crossing. Hence the question, what is the benefit of this electronic process? Because anyway, at some point, you need to get your certificate on paper to submit it to the agency on the other side. So real benefits can only happen when domestic reforms are coordinated at bilateral, or even better, as Céline was mentioning, at the regional level, because trade necessarily involves at least two countries. So it's at least within two countries that the solution can be found. Finally, last comment, trade facilitation solutions are absolutely necessary. Training SMEs on this solution is absolutely necessary. But what we found is that SMEs in many countries need more than training. And if you want to reach real impact, if you want them to benefit from schemes, you need to provide in-house advisory services to these SMEs. And ITC is now systematically implementing a coaching program in the countries where we operate, where local experts, very well versed in procedural requirements, formalities, negotiation with customs brokers, will spend 5 days at the premises of the SMEs to really guide them on the nitty-gritty of managing export and import procedures and formality requirement. And it's only at this level that you can see a real difference on the way SMEs size the opportunity offered by international trade. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to questions of participants.
Thank you, Pierre. Thank you for your the good practices you brought from Central Asia as well as South Asia. And next, we will move to Ms. Celine Kaufman from OECD.
Many thanks for the invitation. My name is Celine Kaufman. I head the Entrepreneurship, SME and Tourism Division at the OECD. We all know that trade policy is not firm size neutral, and that the prevalence of non-tariff barriers makes it difficult for SMEs to engage in international trade. Why? Because the cost of adapting to various regulatory regimes have a strong fixed component that affect SMEs disproportionately and prevent them from entering the market. In particular, the need to collect the relevant information, to adapt products, and to demonstrate compliance through conformity assessment processes across different countries are particularly costly for smaller scale producers, while they can be absorbed by higher volumes of production. Some evidence shows that the share of SMEs, notably in EU exports, was already declining pre-COVID-19. In addition, SMEs have been severely affected by the COVID crisis, exposing further their vulnerability. As documented by the latest OECD SME and Entrepreneurship Outlook, on average in the OECD, SMEs account for about 75% of jobs in the sectors most affected by government restrictions, which is above their average contribution to jobs to the overall economy. However, according to our extensive monitoring of emerging packages, we know that governments reacted swiftly to support SMEs. The support was unprecedented in scale and in reach. In one form or the other, public support reached between 20% and 40% of SMEs in most OECD countries. Without this support, 1 in 3 SMEs would have faced liquidity challenges and risk closing after only 3 months. In the trade area, SME support took mainly 3 forms. 1, emergency liquidity and trade finance. 2, trade cost reduction or deferrals and trade facilitation. 3, help to find alternative markets. Let me provide a couple of examples. The support to finance took the form of export guarantees or support schemes. There are examples from Spain, Korea, and South Africa. An OECD survey of export credit agencies shows that their action had an important SME focus. Around 2/3 of export credit agencies that were surveyed took measures to increase working capital support and allow exporters to cover the cost of inputs to the products they manufacture for export. On the second pillar, several countries, including Canada, suspended or deferred payment of customs duties and tariff. And on the third, to help SMEs find alternative markets and diversify their supplier base, a number of countries have provided market information and intelligence. It was the case of the government of New Zealand, which extended in June 2020 its regional business partner network to include SMEs as part of the trade recovery strategy. This included advice on how to navigate the policy landscape and international market intelligence to help SMEs diversify export and import markets. Going forward, while the liquidity support will have to be phased out progressively, some of the new developments could be consolidated. In particular, of the range of trade facilitation reforms, OECD work shows that more than their larger counterparts, SMEs benefits from 1, transparency, and 2, streamlining and the automation of trade documents and cross-border processes. Let me start first with the importance of timely and easy to access information by SMEs, leveraging notably digital platforms. We are currently surveying the development of virtual one-stop shops in some 50 countries. What we see is that there is overall a comprehensive range of government service offered by the virtual one-stop shop to SMEs across OECD and non-OECD countries. And they are clustered, those services are clustered around some basic business services such as tax declarations, business registration, finance, business development, and public procurement. Foreign trade assistance is part of this offering in 84% of OECD countries surveyed, but only 38% of the 13 major non-OECD countries that are covered in the work. This trend in OECD countries is quite recent but consistent. However, it does not mean that the national government is the sole provider of this service. In 30% of OECD countries, chambers of commerce provide this information. Let me go now to digitalization. Accelerated digitalization opens up new opportunities for SME policies and trade facilitation approaches, but also calls, very importantly, for investment in the digital capabilities of SMEs and for facilitating the development, harmonization, and recognition of electronic trade documents. The preparation, processing, and verification of paper-based documentation across the trade chain remains costly and time-consuming. There is a number of electronic trade documents, such as electronic bills of lading, already operational. For example, SDocs, e-titles from Singapore, eDocs Online, or eBLS. Digital tools also has the potential to improve matching of buyers and sellers and secure transactions. The Israeli company Wave offers a document exchange network to facilitate international trade, which allows importers and exporters to exchange bills of lading easily, securely, and transparently. WeTrade is a platform directed to SME buyers and sellers, facilitated by 12 European banks. It establishes a standardized registration process for SMEs subscribing to the platform and provides the standard client information required by legislation. The platform allows SMEs to find counterparts to undertake open account trade transactions, and its blockchain system allows all parties to have access to the same documentation in real time. But despite these efforts, digital documentation has not become fully mainstreamed and remains limited. Alignment of regulatory efforts is needed to support the trend. The adoption at the level of UNCTRAL of the model law on electronic transferable records is an important step forward in that perspective. On the SME side, while surveys suggest that 30 to 50% of SMEs across the OECD have started using new digital tools during the pandemic, there is a real risk of backsliding. Our recent paper on SME digitalization shows, for example, that if some 40% of SMEs think that the changes will last, there is a size-related issue. 1 out of 3 micro firms do not think that the change in the use of digital technologies will last after the crisis, for example. Fostering SME digitalization is at the core of the initiative that the OECD is hosting, the Digital for SMEs, which is led by New Zealand, Ireland, and Korea. It will be important that the attention remains on the small companies in the recovery phase. It is all the more important that there is a real risk of insolvency and debt overhang for SMEs that will create important challenges to undertake investment going forward. However, our analysis, which will come out in early 2022 in the SME Finance Scoreboard, shows that the share of SME-related policies in recovery packages has decreased in relative terms compared to rescue packages. It amounts to 4% in number of policies and to some 2% in amount of funding compared to 17% in number of policies and 25% in share of public funding invested in the rescue packages. I will stop here and will leave you with some references where the numbers and examples that I've mentioned during the presentation come from. Many thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Celine, for your insightful presentation on the digital transformation, the digitalization for SMEs, as well as trade finance for SMEs in the digital era. And as a matter of fact, trade finance is also an important subgroup of our UNTF survey. I think we have a few minutes for questions, and let's open the floor to audiences if you have any questions, and I can pick out the questions from the chat box. Can I ask a question to Mr. Pierre? Yeah.
Okay. You're the boss.
So as you mentioned that at the end of your presentation, you mentioned the local coaches. And indeed, it's very key for SMEs as well as the traders to know the relevant information from their trading partners. So for the government to exchange those key informations, including custom procedures, those technical issues, as well as the legal issues. So can you be a little bit more specific on the role of local coaches, those programs?
Yes, certainly. Thank you very much for the question. So the approach that we take, I'll take the example of Central Asia, which is the project where we are currently implementing this coaching program in the larger scale. So the way it works is that in each country, we recruit 5 to 10 experienced traders, either former customs officers, former businessmen, former customs brokers, logistics provider. And we usually try to get a mix of competencies within this pool of national experts. Once we have identified these people, we train them on ITC's coaching methodology, which is pretty much a series, if you want, of checklists that allows to verify that SMEs understand the different rules of the game and are in a position to comply with them. It could range from packaging to having an internal workflow for export management, trade finance instrument, labeling, procedural requirements, contracting customs broker, insurance, Incoterms to be used, etc. So it's quite a thorough list of queries that the coach will then have to ask the SMEs and guide them if they are not compliant with the requirement. So these local experts go, as I mentioned, 5 days, not necessarily in a row, sometimes 5 days over a 2 weeks, 3 weeks period at the SME's premises, and start to solve with them all the problems they can find. So in the end, there are two benefits. One, we realize that many SMEs have very concrete problems that only strong local experts can solve. Let me give you a bit of a stupid example, but that's the one that comes to my mind. In Turkmenistan, we had an exporter who had a problem because the card box he had would crush upon each other when they would be put into a stack. And this would damage the goods inside of it. And this SME was about to buy very expensive plastic box to ship his goods, which would have reduced considerably his margin. Now, the local expert has faced this problem in his previous life and just advised him to put some small wooden stick in its current card box to make sure it doesn't crush into each other. And from now on, the guy is exporting. So this is about very practical aspect of trade. Of course, we also help them in understanding the customs requirement in the country of departure and also in the country of origin. And finally, I would say that the more we do the coaching, the more valuable this approach becomes, because we have now coaches in 8 or 9 countries and they all act as a network. So today, if we have some exporters from Uzbekistan that wants to reach Afghanistan, well, we have actually a pool of former coach in Afghanistan that can share information with the Uzbeks on, what are the correct routes to reach the market? What are the risks on the road that you need to take into account? What would be the formalities and tax when you reach Afghanistan? And by having this regionalized and I hope globalized one day pool of experts acting as a network for supporting the SMEs, most of the challenges small business face are actually can be resolved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we don't have any further questions, we have another question from the audience. So there is a question for Ms. Kim from Republic of Korea. So how to standardize electronic documents and exchange process among different stakeholders? Do you have any standard and norms for those practices?
Thank you for your great question. Uh, Especially for between trader and bank, we have association of bank. So with the association bank, we try the standard document and we try to approve from national level. We have a standard organization of Korea, and also we try to follow UN standard core component, something like that for XML. So especially for B2G document, authority have some leadership for standardization. For B2B document, usually service provider guide the document standard.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kim. So finally, some concluding remarks. This is a joint effort of the 5 UNRCs to prepare this webinar series. So finally, let me acknowledge the support from our colleagues in UNECE, ECLAC, ESCWA, and ECA. This session is now closed, and we will have another session on women trade facilitation starting from 6 p.m. Bangkok time.